Hi everyone, happy March, welcome back. Today I am going to go through all of the books that I read throughout February. I have them in my tote right here. Throughout February I ended up reading 8 books total, and I have some new favorites in this pile that I'm very excited to talk about. A few misses as well, but we'll go through all of those. So I am just going to dive right in, but starting off with this one. This is Only If You're Lucky by Stacey Willingham, and this is actually the book that we read in my book club, which if you are not familiar, I do have a book club over on the Fable app. It is 100% free. I'll put the link down below. Right now we are reading The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and I'm very excited. But this one is about Margot. Margot's the main character, and right before she enters college, she loses her best friend in a tragic accident. And you don't really know what exactly happened to the best friend. It's kind of like putting the puzzle pieces together throughout the entire book. But Margot enters college alone. Basically, her first year, she is just in a trance. She's not herself. She misses her best friend, just in a very deep depression. But there are these it girls, Lucy Sharp in particular. They end up inviting her to be a roommate in their sophomore year. So Margot is super excited. She's like, I want to be someone else. I need a change, and she thinks that this is the change that she needs. They move into like an off-campus house that is kind of connected to a frat house, and basically the frat house owns this house. So there is a lot of frat partying in this book, a lot of like drinking and hanging out and typical college things. And during one of these frat parties, one of the frat guys ends up dead. And not long after, Lucy ends up missing. So you're trying to figure out the connection and if Lucy was at fault for this crime, what happened here, while also kind of getting the background story on Margot and her best friend that passed away earlier. And it's just like a twisty turny story. Overall, I thought this one was really fun. I liked the frat party college setting. It was very fun to read and definitely adds to like the dangerous effect. I will say it did start off a little bit slow. There are certain parts in this book that I ended up skimming. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I liked it a lot, but I will say it is not my favorite by Stacey Willingham. I still think it was a good read though, and I enjoyed it. Moving on to Eliza Starts a Rumor. I was pretty excited for this one. I found this kind of randomly at Half Price Books. It sounded very cute. There's even a little Emily Henry quote on the cover saying, "Brimming with charm." But this book did probably turn out to be my least favorite of the entire month. I couldn't really get into it. There are a lot of characters that you're trying to follow here, but the main story takes place around this community board. And it's like a local community page where all of the mothers in towns can kind of chit chat and give each other advice and just talk about things. But the main character here, Eliza Hunt, she started this community board years ago, and then she ends up finding out that there's a competitor board that's like younger and hipper and cooler. So she decides to start a rumor about what is going on in the neighborhood, just to kind of liven up the community board page and, you know, add a little bit of drama, a little spice. But that rumor ends up kind of creating a domino effect and affecting the lives of several other women in this book. And honestly, that entire description that I just said, it sounds like such a good book, but I just felt like the execution was not there. The POVs were very confusing to follow, and I just felt like a lot of the writing felt very dated and weird and like trying to be hip and use certain lingo, and it wasn't working. It did also turn out to be a lot more serious than I thought it was going to be. Like, I was hoping for something kind of light and fun, and towards the end it just started to get a little bit darker than what I was in the mood for. At the beginning of the book, I was pretty interested though, because the main character, Eliza, struggles with agoraphobia, which is something that I have dealt with, especially post-COVID. And for 2 years, I barely left my house. Like, I couldn't, so I found that aspect of the character very relatable. But then it just so much of the other characteristics are just very one-dimensional. And because there are so many characters, there are so many storylines. They all just kind of ended up feeling a little rushed, like nothing really panned out fully. I don't know, I did not love this one, and I was so sad because I really thought that I was going to, but I did end up giving this one 2 stars. Next up though, I have Ready or Not by Cara Bastone, and this one, oh my gosh, this one is probably my favorite of the month. I feel like last year I was handing out 5 stars willy-nilly, and I don't feel like I know how to rate books. So I was very on the fence with this one if I should give it 5 stars, but I went with 4.5. But this one is about the main character Eve, who ends up having a unplanned pregnancy after a one-night stand. So throughout this book, she is kind of navigating this new journey that she is on while trying to figure out this situation with the baby daddy and whether he wants to be involved. They're definitely not together in that way. She also ends up having tension with one of her best friends who has been struggling with infertility, and now she has this pregnancy that she didn't necessarily want, and it just feels very unfair to the best friend. The best friend also has a brother, and these 3 are kind of a trio. They've been friends for years, and the brother Shep kind of steps in and helps out and fills in the gaps where Willa, the best friend, couldn't. So Eve and Shep just end up kind of having a closer relationship, and I will say Shep is the cutest thing. He is like the definition of like golden retriever boyfriend. They obviously end up having feelings for one another, and it is so cute because you do still have the baby daddy involved in it all as well. It's a weird situation. So I will say there are like obviously heavier topics in here, including infertility and depression and grief and all of that. But the way that it's written is just so light and sweet, and I was like giggling throughout this book. The writing is very, very funny, very cute. I loved this book a lot. I loved these characters a lot, and even the cover. First of all, the cover is gorgeous, but there is a scene the cover is based on in the book, and it was the cutest thing ever. So I would highly recommend this book. I thought it was adorable. Definitely my favorite of the month. Next, I have Before We Were Innocent by Ella Berman. And this is another one that I was really excited for, probably based off the cover. I think the cover is really cute. And this one's interesting. It is written in 2 different timelines. And years ago, there were these 3 best friends that have their high school graduation, like last hurrah trip to Greece. I mean, don't we all do that after high school graduation? So these 3 girls are gone for the entire summer in Greece, and one of them winds up dead. And the circumstances are a little bit bizarre. There's a lot of things that are just conflicting in the 2 other girls' stories, so people assume that they had something to do with it. So throughout the dual timelines, you are in the past and watching that story unfold. But in the present day, the 2 girls that made it out alive, they haven't spoken for about 10 years until one turns up at the other's house and needs a favor. And it feels like it is happening all over again. This was a fun read. Like, it takes you on a wild ride. I could not decide what I thought, if I thought one of them did it, or what the truth really was. So I did actually really enjoy this one, but I did end up giving this 3 stars as well, because there are some things that just didn't necessarily add up in this book, and there are certain chapters that are a little slow or feel a little bit repetitive. It's not one where you're like kind of sitting on the edge of your seat trying to figure things out, but it was an interesting one. Also in February, we got Magnolia Park's Into the Dark, and this is another book that I was waiting for. I was so excited because the last Magnolia Park's book left me on the world's biggest cliffhanger. I have a few thoughts about this book. Overall, I enjoyed it because I enjoy this universe. But I will say that it was incredibly repetitive, which most of the Magnolia Parks books are. Without giving too much away, because this one is like the 5th in the series, BJ and Magnolia have just always had issues in their relationship, and it does continue on in this book, but there is a lot of growth between this book and the last one. Like, these 2 characters are a lot more likable. Magnolia, although she is struggling immensely in this book, there's so much happening to this poor girl. She's so funny. The banter is so good in this book. It does talk a lot about grief. That is like the main storyline, kind of navigating grief and going through that journey. So it was a little bit heavier this time around. Like obviously these are not light fluffy books, but I did cry several times. There was a big storyline in this book though that revolved around two characters, Magnolia's parents, and I don't like them. I don't really care about them, and that storyline I just felt like dragged on. It was so boring and mostly unnecessary. Like could have been 100, 200 pages shorter. So for that, I did end up giving this one 3 stars, but the ending was nice. It did wrap things up in a tidy little bow, which never happens with these books, and I guess this is the last of the Magnolia Parks series. There are supposed to be 2 more Daisy Hates books though, so I'm very, very excited about that because I prefer Daisy. But this was still good, and I always love these books, so this was great. I also read The Love Wager by Lynn Painter, and I really adore Lynn Painter. This one was her second adult novel. It comes after Mr. Wrong Number, and apparently Jack, one of the main characters in this book, is in Mr. Wrong Number, but I read that one so long ago I did not remember. I didn't make any connection. So I kind of wish that I read these 2 back to back so that I could kind of see that connection, because it went over my head, girl. This book also starts out with a one-night stand between Hailie and Jack. And they end up kind of finding each other again on a dating app, but they're not interested in dating, but they kind of wingman for one another and make a bet on who can find love first. So throughout this book, both of them are dating side by side, and often they'll have dates at the same place, and if they flop and they need a quick escape, they'll ditch their dates and grab tacos after. So very cute. As these 2 grow closer, they end up having a very special bond, a very tight friendship, and they end up going as a fake couple to a wedding. And obviously, hello, anytime that you are faking a relationship, you are just destined to be in one. So that's exactly what happens in this book. They do end up falling for one another, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to ruin our friendship and never talk to you again if this doesn't work out, but it is worth the risk for the love that they have. It's definitely a very cute book. I did also give this one 3 stars because I actually just read Betting on You by Lynn Painter, which felt very similar to like maybe a YA version of this book. Like the storylines were so similar. It did feel a little bit repetitive, like I was reading a spin-off of that same book. They even go on a trip together in the same state and fake dates, and it was just too similar for me. Maybe if I read these like spread out, I would have enjoyed it more, but I don't know. Next, I have Social Engagement by Avery Carpenter Foray, and when I picked up this book, it was kind of described as like navigating the millennial wedding scene, which felt very appropriate these days. I literally just got back from a wedding weekend, and I'm currently in the wedding planning process myself, so I was like, this sounds very fun. And like at the very beginning of this book, we have the bride in the bathtub shoveling her face with pizza because things have already gone south the night of her wedding. So it starts off very strong, but this book was super not what I expected it to be, and I don't really know how I feel about it. The main character is very odd. She has like some sort of obsession with the human anatomy, and she is constantly like drawing these very dark sketches and sharing them on her bridal body Instagram. So there are like very like dark descriptions in this book that is just like, it felt so out of left field based on what I thought I was getting into. And it's one of those books where none of the characters are very likable, so you're not really rooting for anyone throughout here. It's dark in the sense of all of the anatomy talk, because it is very heavy. Anatomy, bones, body parts, every chapter. But also mentioned in nearly every chapter is the main character's eating disorder in great detail. So I will say, if that is a trigger for you, avoid this at all costs, because oof, did not make me feel great reading that. I'm not sure how else to describe this book. It's kind of like The main character has a very wedding-filled year. You're going through all of these different weddings and just kind of millennial wedding culture. And the main character is engaged to this guy. Like, it's a very quick engagement, fast wedding planning, and she's definitely not really into this guy. She actually has a huge long-term crush on her best friend's cousin. He's a huge part in this story, and also the best friend. There's tension. It was a strange book. I don't know. I'm kind of in between like 2.5 stars, maybe 3 stars, because I didn't hate it. It was interesting, but it was not exactly what I was expecting, and I don't really know. If you've read this one, please share your thoughts down below, because I'm so curious about how other people took this book in. Like, it was so strange. And last but definitely not least, Dolly Alderton's Good Material. Oh my goodness, I loved this book. This book is about 35-year-old comedian Andy, who just got dumped after a 4-year relationship and is navigating his new life and his balding head. There's a lot of ups and mostly downs that Andy is dealing with at 35 years old, trying to start over while basically all of his friends are settled down, married, with children, and he's starting a whole new life. This book was very, very funny and also extremely relatable. Although I am not in my 30s, I did feel a lot of this throughout my 20s. There are so many parts that I was like full on cackling at, and then other parts where I'm like sobbing. Basically the whole book is written in Andy's point of view, and you're on all of his misadventures, but towards the very tail end of the book, you get the ex-girlfriend's point of view. It's like the last 60 or so pages. Throughout this book, you kind of think of her as the villain, although nothing was like malicious in this breakup. It was just a breakup. Through Andy's eyes that you're reading this in, you're like, ugh, she sucks. But then you get her point of view and everything that she's been dealing with throughout this breakup and why she decided to end their relationship. And oh my gosh, I was crying. It is so extremely relatable. I think a ton of women can relate to everything that she is feeling and experiencing. It was just so well written. I love Dolly Alderton. This is another one that was highly anticipated for me, and it did not disappoint. This one I ended up giving 4 stars to. One of the quotes on the back of the book calls it a modern romantic masterpiece, and I could not have said it better myself. This book is amazing and I highly recommend. And that wraps up all of the books that I read throughout February. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought. Overall, it was a very fun reading month. I had a lot of good ones in this pile, some very interesting ones, and then only really one like flop that I didn't enjoy. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon.